Hello, welcome back to EDH on a Budget. I'm your host, Iceman, and today's episode is called Don't Settle for Single Target Removal. We're going to go over one of each color and a bonus one for colorless. So first up, we have Nessian Bore. This creature is a 3 green for the mana cost, and it has all creatures able to block Nessian Bore do so. Whenever Nessian Bore becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller draws a card. Its stats are a 10-6. So technically, it forces all untapped creatures that can block it to block it. With power 10, that's going to remove a lot of creatures. And defensive 6 can possibly survive the combat depending on how many creatures and how strong it is. But what I use this for is when I cast it, I often will attack the player that has their commander untapped because they just cast it after I cast Nessian Bore, and then they have to block it. Unless it has haste or some other tap ability, which isn't too common. So what ends up happening is Nessian Bore will often survive if they have no other ways to kill the beast. Or Boar technically is not beast. And I will use this again and again and again until they find a way to remove it. Or what also tends to happen is they just stop casting their commanders if they haven't cast it by the time this thing's already attacking. It can be very political. Yes, they will draw some cards, but the fact that any creature they cast that has summoning sickness will be forced to block this if I attack them. And the other players that's not attacking don't really have much incentive to block it. You could attack them and make a deal like, oh, don't kill it, and you'll get to draw some cards. The creature will probably die anyway, but sometimes they're okay with that. So it could be political, but it's also a way that green can kill creatures every turn, which there's not too many ways to do that in green. Usually their fight effects are just one-time effects. So this card is 13 cents, and it's worth trialing out in many decks. Green cares about power, and power 10. I mean, if you're playing a Ghalta deck, that's just green for Ghalta at that point. You're going to be drawing cards because green cares about the power to draw cards, your number of creatures. This kind of does everything green wants to do. Next up, we have Dismantling Wave for 83 cents. It has, well, its main cost is 2 and a white for this sorcery. For each opponent, destroy up to one target artifact or enchantment that player controls. So, yes, it's sorcery, but you're getting rid of 3 of their best artifacts and enchantments. So, that right there is an instant 3 for 1. Next, it has Cycling for 6 white. When you cycle Dismantling Wave, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. You're not going to be paying 8 mana very often to do that, but it's kind of nice to have that flexibility. With the 2 costs, it's kind of like it's useful in the beginning of the game, middle of the game, and with the alternate cycling ability, which is not casting, so it's harder to counter. It kind of makes it useful at the end of the game as well. Unless you're ramping really hard. Maybe you could get that in the middle, depending on the deck. Next up, we have Malicious Affliction for $1.25. This instant removal has Morbid. When you cast Malicious Affliction, if a creature died this turn, you may copy Malicious Affliction, and you may choose a new target for the copy. The actual effect of this card is destroy target non-black creature. So, some people don't like that it says non-black creature because, that's about 1 out of the 5 colors if you exclude colorless. If you included colorless, that'd make it even more creatures that it would take out. If you ignore it, that's 1 out of 5 creatures it can't destroy. But that's another way of saying that's 80% it can destroy. And then when you add in colorless, that's even more it can destroy. So I'm not too heartbroken on the non-black creature, especially because it didn't say if a creature you control died or a non-token creature died or a legendary. There was no specifics on what kind of creature had to die, just a creature had to die. So you could block with a creature, and knowing that it's going to die, use this, and then take out 2 creatures. You could, if it's your turn, you could, attack and ask somebody, hey, can you chump block with that? And I'll get rid of those 2 things over there. It is creature specific, but 2 black mana to get rid of 2 creatures. Pretty good. I like it. Next up, for red, we have Volcanic Salvo. Now this is a sorcery, and the mana cost is going to sound crazy, but of course it's got a way to reduce it. This card costs 8 cents. The mana cost is 10 red, red. This sorcery spell says this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total power of creatures you control. Volcanic Salvo deals 6 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers. So yes, it's a sorcery, it has to be cast on your turn, but 6 damage to 2 targets is a ton. It's good. The vast majority of creatures are going to die with 6 damage. There's not too many that are naturally going to survive past that. And the fact that this can get rid of planeswalkers that have loyalty 6 or less, which will be most of them, hopefully. You should. I mean, if they have more than that, you're really, really struggling. But 6 damage would be enough to take out the majority of planeswalkers. And that power reduction, the spell cost reduction based off of total power of creatures, it's not of the strongest power, it is total. So if you have 5 2/2s, that's going to reduce it by 10. If you have even 3 3/3s, 2 4/4s, you're only going to pay 2 to 4 mana for this spell to get rid of 2 creatures, or creature and a planeswalker, 2 planeswalkers, whatever. It's very flexible like that, and as far as red's concerned, 6 damage is a lot. There's not too many red spells that will do more than 5 damage that have the ability to be reduced down to a cost of red. Next up, we have a somewhat newer card, Kitesail Larcenist. It is 88 cents. This creature, it costs 2 and a blue. It's a human pirate, 2/3 stats with flying and ward 1. When Kitesail Larcenist enters the battlefield, for each player, choose up to 1 target artifact or creature that player controls. For as long as Kitesail Larcenist remains on the battlefield, the chosen permanents become treasure artifacts with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color, and lose all other abilities. So this is flexible in that you could choose artifact or creature. It is flexible in that you can choose up to 1. So if you had an ally that you didn't want to mess with, you could bypass them. You don't have to choose 1 for you. And if you did choose 1 for you, it could be a way to kind of ritual-like boost your mana and save it up for next turn or whatever. It does have ward 1, which isn't a lot, but it's going to make the removal a little bit more expensive to remove it. So they probably won't be able to remove it the turn you play it, which when you're playing removal, that is the idea. And it kind of gets real tricky on whether or not, do they want to sacrifice that creature for treasure? Are they hoping somebody else will remove Kitesail and that their creature or artifact will come back? It's kind of a guessing game, which are always fun for you. Not necessarily for them, but for you. And next we have Blade Griff Prototype. This is an artifact creature, Griffin type. It costs 5 mana, and it's real cheap. It's only 15 cents. 3/2 stats with flying. Whenever Blade Griff Prototype deals combat damage to a player, destroy target non-land permanent of that player's choice that one of my opponents controls. So, it's a big lengthy paragraph, but the bottom line is, whatever gets destroyed is not going to be yours. You don't get to choose it. The player you attacked gets to choose what gets destroyed. And it does have to be non-land, so it can't attack mana bases. But when I play this card, what often happens is the other two players at the table who are not winning with, they don't care. They're not picking your stuff. They're not picking their own stuff. They're gonna be like, player A, they're the problem. We need to get rid of that Smothering Tithe, or we need to get rid of whatever issue is on the board over there. So they're not gonna remove it. They are more than happy to take 3 damage to remove something they want to be removed. It's a good deal for them. Even if they have flyers or reach, taking the damage is almost always going to be advisable for them, and they're not going to want to remove it until they become the threat. And if they're the threat, it's kind of like, do they really want to remove it instead of other issues that are going on the board? This is really good on hasty decks. Artifacts have tons of ways to reduce that 5 CMC cost. So those are all great, and it's just always funny when I cast this. Because I can do this every turn, it just incrementally gets so much value. You move one thing, and 5 mana, you're like, not great. And then you removed 2 things, and then 3, and 4, until somebody basically board wipes. But they're also going to be incentivized not to board wipe because the biggest threats keep getting removed. So it kind of sticks around longer than it should. And most people don't want to use removal on this, so it's just a all-around great card that I feel is undervalued, and it can go in any deck. It's colorless, so there's really no reason to not give this one a try. If you have not played with it, it's going to be a fun card. Guarantee it. And thank you for watching. You rock.